I've almost always had male bosses and a lot of male colleagues who repeatedly called me out for being a pussy, not using that word, but that tone. And vulnerability is strength. There are all different ways of defining strength. And I am tired of being told that a more feminine approach or a more emotional approach is weaker. It's not.
You're listening to the Sex Curious podcast, where each episode we explore the wild world of modern sex and relationships, from the typical to the alternative to everything in between. Join me, Holly Bradshaw, as I get curious with some incredible writers, educators, and other professionals in the sex-positive space. And remember, always stay curious. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Sex Curious podcast with me, Holly Bradshaw. We have an amazing guest to hear from today. I am so grateful she took the time to come on here and talk about her work. The things this woman is putting out into the world, they're beautiful and they come in many different forms. We touch on relationships, female sexuality, vulnerability, heartache, being a writer and artist online, and putting yourself out there, your erotic work out there, and not always knowing how to deal with the response that brings. So let me tell you just a little bit about Yael Wolf. She's a writer, photographer, and artist whose work explores female sexual liberation, the power of nature, and the importance of building a strong relationship with ourselves. She is so eloquent in everything she has to say. She just wants to be the big bad wolf. And, I think when it comes to this space of writers and artists that I'm getting to talk to, she is. So, on to the interview.
Oh, good. Perfect. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
I am so excited to get to talk to you, not over text.
I know, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking time to let me interview you.
Oh, thank you for asking. And I did this a couple of years ago on your end, as the interviewer.
Really?
And so I know that it's, for me, because I'm an introvert, but it's kind of like a daring thing to do. So I have so much admiration for people who do this. And yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I've read your work and I've spoken to you, but I still get nervous. I get microphone fright or something, kind of like stage fright. I don't know what it is.
Oh, me too. No matter what. Yeah. Even if it's someone I know, it's just, you just get that little stage frightish feeling.
It's, I guess, and when you're a writer, I mean, I might be more of an extrovert and I love to hang out with people, but speaking is not my strong point. It's more writing. So this is a good exercise.
Yes. Same here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. First thing, I'm familiar with your writing and I know you do some other stuff besides that. You have artwork going into a variety of different forms. So for those who don't know you or maybe aren't familiar with all aspects of your work, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do? And have you always been writing and creating art?
Yeah. So always, yes. Since I was a kid, I kind of knew that this was going to be my path. I grew up in a relatively creative family. There were lots of artists in my family, mostly painters though. And so that didn't appeal to me quite as much. And it was in second grade, I started writing poetry and things like that. And I got really into it. And it was really a defining moment when I turned 10 and my parents decided to write a novel out of the blue. And they chose my name to use as their pen name. And they had business cards printed up. And I remember they brought a brand new typewriter home one day with a laminated business card with my name on it. And underneath it said author. And I looked at that card and I'm like, yep, that's me.
That's really cool. What was this book about, if I can ask?
Oh, you're going to laugh. So it was a cowboy romance novel.
Oh my gosh, I would read that in a second. Is it out?
No, they never finished it. That's the
Oh,
funny
okay.
thing. And I basically stole their typewriter and ended up being the one to write all the novels. So I always had a love for writing from a young age. And like I said, at 10, I was very sure that I was going to be a writer when I grew up. And I started getting into other things as a teenager. I was really into photography and videography at the time, which was very tough in the 90s. You know, we had those giant camcorders that would sit on your shoulder, and I didn't have any editing software. So everything that I did, I had to hook up two VCRs together to tape from one to the other. And that's how I edited things. It was terrible.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me of did you ever hear of the TV show The Goldbergs?
No.
Okay. He's a kid in the 80s actually, and grows up to be a filmmaker, and that's the kind of stuff he
Yes.
was, putting together.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
No problem. Yeah, that's how it was. It was pretty old school.
I love it.
I realized at the time that my interest was really in telling stories, and that each one of those art forms was just another way to do that. And so that brought me further into it, and this fascination with what kinds of strategies would you use to tell a story in one image, a still image. What would be different in a screenplay versus a narrative novel? And I had so much fun playing with that, and that really has been something that has carried through my whole life, that I've always been into. So at this point, yeah, I kind of do a lot of different things, from novel writing, articles, photography, starting to get into a little bit more of that videography that I used to do as a kid. And I actually did end up doing a lot of paintings, which someday I will share with the world, but there's just too much to do right now.
Yeah, I love all of that, and I've never been able to really paint myself, but I admire when people do that, and I love it because my husband paints, and he doesn't do it enough.
Yeah.
Because I like to hang up his stuff and look at it, and it's great.
I love that. Yeah, painting is hard. I don't think I'm very good at it. I just do it for fun.
Yeah. I don't know how anyone figures that out.
Me neither.
Yeah, that's great. I like I said, I'm a huge fan of your writing. I think you're one of the first blogs I found when I started writing myself. I know you write about a lot of different topics, but for the purpose of being sex curious here, I'd love to hear what motivates you to write about sex and relationships, and specifically, like, what's your message about female sexuality that you'd like to share with the world?
So it almost feels funny to say this, but I always had a curiosity about sex, which I kind of think everybody does, right? I mean, it's just a thing.
I think that's safe to say, yeah.
Yes, right? And I feel like it's just we're taught not to be, especially as women, we're taught not to be sexually curious because, that's just taboo. But I always was as a kid. And, I was just always wanting to understand it more. And granted, I grew up in the 80s in Los Angeles, so sex was everywhere, literally. And there was always Playboy stuff around, and my cousins, uncles, meaning on the side that weren't married through marriage, I should say, they were always dating and doing some interesting things with their girlfriends in front of us. And, it's it was in my face. So, and then I had that other side of it where my parents and other adults would be like, oh, no, that's not to be looked at right now. And so there was all these weird conflicting messages about it. And of course, being the person that I am, I'm like, well, I'm just going to figure it out on my own. And as a young woman, I did start to feel more indoctrinated into that idea that, I should keep this closed and buttoned up and not look at it. And yet I still couldn't help myself. So it was in my first sexual relationship, it was I had been set free, and I'm like, okay, well, now I'm having sex, so it's okay to be curious about it. And I can remember going to the library and getting all of these books. And this was in the day before you scanned it yourself. So I had to take this stack of sex books to a librarian while she's staring at me. And I'm just smiling at her dumbly, like, yeah, this is so cool, right?
This is what these resources are here for us to use them.
And I just laugh to think of that, of how like shamelessly I did that. And I'm, like, okay, that's great. I'm glad I was able to do that. At least that one little thing.
Did the librarian seem to feel awkward or judgy about it, or?
She was very, I wouldn't say uptight, but very neutral. Like she was trying to be neutral,
Okay.
So I could tell something was a little awkward there, but she was cool about it. So yeah. And then add to that the fact that even again, from a young age, I knew that I had a lot of not just sexual curiosity, but sexual energy. And I could tell that it affected the way that I wrote, like as a writer or as even a photographer. The things that I was creating were really affected by what level my, sexual energy would be at any given moment. And I was really creative and particularly expressive when I was very, sexually high, I guess you could say. And that made me further curious about it and really notice that those things went hand in hand. And that's kind of how I feel that, sexual energy and creative energy are basically the same thing. And so as I got older and I went through, relationships and difficult times and breakups and sexual disappointments and all of that stuff, I got into my 40s and I was like, what is going on here? What happened to my life? And all of the things that I wish I had said and done and known as, a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old. And I kept circling this idea of what if I just talked about it in my writing? And I had already been doing that in little ways before that. In one of the novels that I wrote, the character in the novel is extremely sexually curious. And, I kept thinking, this is so weird that I'm writing about this. This isn't like me. And it's like, no, that was me, And so I go back in my journals now and I can see a year and a half ago, I had already planned all of this. It just took me a few months to get up the courage to do it. And then one day I finally said, I want to do this. I want to do this for the young women in my life who, not that I didn't intend for them to read my own work, but that if I contribute to these voices that are out here talking about this, it'll create a world where they'll be able to find this information and feel comfortable talking about it too,
Sure.
And that kind of just led me down this path, and here I am.
Oh, great. I'm glad you found it. And I'm glad, I don't know, you were a lot more brave about it, I think, than I was. Just kind of opening up to your sexuality and exploring it. And like, I don't think I could have gone up to that library when I was that age. That's really, I really admire that. I would love to hear more about your photography and how did you start to develop that particular passion? And what are the subjects you like to focus on now?
I started it because I liked to, this is also going to sound strange, but I like to look at people's faces and try to understand them by their face and the way their eyes look, And
yeah, I feel like I get that.
I think a lot of people are, we already naturally do that with each other, just with body language and that comforting level of being able to look at someone and see their eyes and understand what they mean without necessarily having to talk or the meaning behind their words. And I sensed all of these stories behind these faces, And I also at the time was looking at a lot of photography books and seeing portraits and things like that. And that was my initial interest in it, was how do you capture someone's story just with a picture of their face? And as I went on with that, I started noticing things about the body that I really loved too. And not necessarily nudes, but just the lines of a body, in or out of clothes, and like how someone's arm bends or what their fingers look like when they're not paying attention, like when they're just, at rest. How do they cross their legs or not cross their legs? And all of these things are like these little details of who a person was to me. And I wanted to learn how to capture that and again tell that story of who are they. And it also ended up becoming specifically focused on women, which so much of my work comes back to that, and like a woman's story, and who are we as women, and what are the stories we have that don't get to be told. And I even felt that as a teenager, and was very interested in pursuing that. And that, of course, led me to the idea of nature as a woman. And I already loved nature and being outside, and so I saw the beauty of it from very young in my childhood. And so it was only natural for me to turn the camera onto that and explore what that looked like, and the energy of that world, and the colors and textures and all the different things that all contribute to that story as well. There was just like endless inspiration every time I went outside. I had a million pictures that I could take when I was in nature. It was just amazing.
Right. And, I've seen some of your work, some of your photography online that you share on your website and stuff. And it's, I have no idea how you do it. You add something to it. I think when you're editing,
Yes.
like you give things such a different look, and it reminds me almost of painting. Like it's gorgeous what you do with some of the things, and you're welcome. It makes it look so different. And I think there's some things you take photos of that you don't work on so much afterwards. Forgive me, like I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yes, some of them are more like edited and filtered, and others are just as they came out. Yeah,
that's an artwork in itself. I think like doing different things to the image, and you just have such a knack for that.
I'm still learning a lot from that, so it's all an experiment.
I recommend, if anyone is interested in, artistic photography, to check out what you're doing, because I think it's really cool.
Thank you.
Well, that leads me to asking about your book, Rising, which I've also seen snippets of that as well. And your description is that you're exploring through words and visual art how the power of sexuality and creativity in life always rise to the surface. And I just wanted to know what inspired you to create this, and how does it feel to boldly and bravely photograph your own naked body and share yourself with the world, like in an erotic light? I think that's amazing.
Thank you. Oh God, I have so much to say about that.
I'm sure you have lots of thoughts on this.
Definitely. Okay, so to go back to how it came about, I started actually doing self-portraits as a kind of therapy almost in about 2014, which was a couple months before my ex-partner left. And I remember at the time I was already sensing this ending was coming and that things were happening. And I was feeling extremely disconnected from my sexuality. I was finding it hard to see myself as a woman or as someone with any like sexual value. Our relationship had just broken to the point where I didn't know who I was anymore, And so I turned the camera on myself, just as like this little voice said, why don't you just try taking some pictures of yourself and just seeing what happens from that? Because again, that taking pictures in itself was just a natural thing for me, but turning them on myself was something I'd never done before. And so I did that and was shocked by how some of them turned out, because I saw someone who was a sexual being, and an actual woman that, and again, it's hard for me to describe that, like that disconnection from womanhood, that sometimes one can feel. And I'm sure that goes for any gender, that if you're not connected to your sexuality, it's like it can unplug you from that, Mm-hmm. So that led me to continue that again, although it took a long time, because there were quite a few years in between there where I just completely shut down after the breakup. It was like, okay, this is not a sexual being here anymore. Doors are closed, out of business. I'm almost 40. I'm done, And as I started coming out of that, one of the things that rose to the surface was this curiosity again that I was talking about, and how much I wanted to write about sex and explore it as a subject. And the fact that I allowed myself to do that led me to the next step, which was pulling out this slip that I used to have, that I used to wear for my ex, because I didn't like lingerie. And this was the only thing that I could wear that he thought was sexy and I thought was sexy. And I still happened to have it. So I pulled it out from the back of my drawer. And this was spring, I think, of 2019. And I set up my nice camera, not my iPhone, but my good camera, and started taking pictures. And as I was taking pictures, it's like I felt this life force in me rising up, up from like my feet up. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, I literally have not felt like I have any sexual worth in this world for all this time, but I am a sexual being. I am a worthwhile person. I am a woman. All of these things were coming up, and the whole session ended up with me like literally naked on the bed crying, but in a good way.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
after that, I knew I wanted to return to those images. And so I'd periodically do that, but not too deeply. And then as I was coming into this stage of thinking, okay, I am ready to go out and date. I am ready to, I'd already dabbled in that, but like I was really ready to do something big and like have sex again, like let's do something. And then the pandemic hit, and it was such a frustration to me. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be stuck in my house forever. No one's ever going to touch me again.
Yeah. Oh
And
my gosh. The sexual
yeah.
frustration the pandemic must
Oh
be
yeah, for
bringing
sure.
to people.
And then just this feeling of, like, how am I going to deal with this? The whole thing all brought on this overwhelming feeling that I have no doubt everyone was going through, like, what are we going to do with ourselves now? And it really can dampen your mood, your creativity, your sexuality, all of that. And I had this realization at some point in it that I got to get my camera out. What am I doing? I've got to get my camera out and put my slip on. And so I started taking these pictures. I was inspired by Catherine Just, who is an amazing photographer. And I took my slip off and hung it on a chair to represent how I felt in that moment, which was like an empty shell of this, sexual image that I want to be able to fill. I want to be able to put the slip on and be that. And for like 2 hours, I sat there taking pictures of myself, putting the slip on, taking it off, all of these different things. And it literally changed my life. That I will never forget that day. Because once again, just like that very first time I had done the slip photo shoot, it just filled me with life force and renewal of purpose and an understanding of who I was. And that is the moment that this photography collection was born. And I realized this energy is always here. It is always waiting to be released and expressed. And all we have to do is let it happen. And, it's not that it's always thunderous. Sometimes it's a quiet little stream, and that's fine. But it is always there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the first moment that I realized I could have faith in that, instead of thinking that, oh, well, it's gone. It's just gone and I'm closed now. It's never closed. Like it is always there for us to access it. And that was just such a beautiful moment.
I'd say that's pretty inspiring for, I don't know, women. I mean, I've been there just like struggling with not feeling worthy or sexual. For me, that it's been going on a lot lately. And I just think it speaks a lot about love for yourself.
Exactly. So much of it is self-love. Yeah.
Turning back to your writing again, I think that's what I'm probably most familiar with. And on your blog, your writing is so personal and it's honest. And that's one of the things I love about it. And you're not afraid to talk about things like your desire for relationships and your hope to have a baby and missing your extended family, who I know recently moved away. And I think these kinds of feelings, some women might feel they have to like be tough and hide that vulnerability in order to seem strong. And I love that you can write about those vulnerable things and show that we can still be strong even when we're working through like this shitty stuff that we have to go through. So I wanted to know, what has been your experience with sharing your authentic self, online and writing the way you do? Has it brought conflict, or has it brought, happy circumstances, or probably both,
Yes,
I'd
both.
imagine, from my
Yeah.
experience. So
Yeah, I would wager that most of us have very similar experiences with this. Yeah, I think that I started out this way because for my whole life, I felt like I had to edit myself and speak in certain ways and present myself in a certain way, and all of that is very male centric. Like you said, like we don't show our vulnerabilities. We do say and behave in ways that express that we have a certain amount of strength, or that and sometimes it's just trying to guard ourselves and all of that. And I
yeah.
I really struggled with that my whole life, particularly in jobs, because I've almost always had male bosses and a lot of male colleagues who repeatedly called me out for being a pussy, not using that word, but that tone, like, and
Basically, yeah, like
yes. And
implying
I
that.
literally was called girly many times. And again, like turning 40 is a really incredible thing. It just changes your perspective on so many things. And it's like, no, I'm done with that. It's not girly. It's not weakness. Vulnerability is strength. There are all different ways of defining strength. And I am tired of being told that a more feminine approach or a more emotional approach is weaker. It's not. And so I wanted to come from that, mindset, but also I felt like it was important that if I was going to share this stuff, that I wanted it to be completely honest and vulnerable, so that other people, could connect with it and feel like maybe they were dealing with this and weren't alone, because I think there's so much posturing in our society, again, to uphold that idea that we're strong and we're okay. And I don't think that we need to be that way. Like, I think that is a disservice to people sometimes. I mean, there's a need for it here and there, sure, but I think that we
Yeah.
are starving for vulnerability in this society. So that was really important to me too. But it is a little bit dangerous because it attracts people who are dealing with the same issues, and that in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes they aren't willing to look at their own issues, and they come to you and kind of fling themselves on top of you as if you can swim them out of this ocean that they're in, and you're sitting there thinking, I'm just sitting here treading my own water. I can't carry you too,
Yeah.
And also, people know every weakness that you have, all of your favorite things, all of your worst fears, and those who aren't so well-intentioned can take advantage of that. And that has happened. So I tend to be a lot more cautious nowadays. It does kind of open a door, honestly, and I don't always want that door to be open. So I'm learning how to hold it so that it's kind of closed, without losing the vulnerability, because I don't want to lose that. And I hope that it does, like, all of this will ultimately be more for good than for bad. Like, I'll see more good out of it than bad. And I think that will be true, because already that has been true. But it can be a little scary. And there have been times where I have felt like maybe I shouldn't have printed that. Mostly, though, that happens when I talk about other people, because I want to be very careful about how I tell my story as it overlaps with other people's story, and not to go too far into their
Yes.
story. And that's tough. And there have been times when I've written about my family and I feel like, I don't know, did this go over the line too much? Because a lot of times, people will, again, walk through that door and they'll be like, oh, well, your sister should be doing this with her kids and your nephew should be doing, and I'm like, no, that is off limit. That is, my story overlapped with theirs there. That's why I told it. But that is, no, you don't get to touch that. You can tell me whatever you want, but don't talk about them,
Yeah, and I I totally struggle with that as someone who writes nonfiction and puts my feelings out there. You know, people shape our stories and they
Yeah.
absolutely affect what we, you know, become and what we want to talk about. And I guess when you're online and people can comment whatever
Mhm.
they want,
Mhm. Yep.
and they do, um, I struggle with the same thing because, like you said, I've wanted to tell stories that have affected me, but it's not as if I'm seeking advice
Yes. Right.
for what other people have done. Like, I don't need you to tell me what to go tell this other person. um, I'm putting it out there kind of for my own therapeutic purpose and in hopes that someone will learn from it or be inspired by it. It's not exactly like I'm coming to you as my therapist and please tell me what to tell these people.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yes. I totally understand that. And the thing about you mentioned like being vulnerable or being called girly because you get emotional. That reminded me of having male bosses in like terrible jobs. And sometimes it was a female boss too, but
Mhm.
I would get so furious that I would cry. You
Mhm.
know, you have like a talk about something that's going on at work
Yeah.
and people think you're being like weak because you're crying. And I'm like, no, it's because there's like this rage simmering beneath the
Right.
surface. And I show that by crying.
Yes.
I don't know why. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. You're like, you don't even know what's underneath this.
exactly. Exactly. And I guess as a writer, it depends on how much you engage with your
Oh,
readers
yeah.
and what they say sometimes.
Yeah. That's a really tough one for me, and I have continued to struggle with that. In the beginning, it was like, "Oh, no one will want to engage, like, this will just be me on this platform, and then blah, 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 and I'll go away, and it'll be fine." It surprised me, I don't know why, but it surprised me that so many people were wanting to comment and email and all of this, and so over time, I've kind of tried to evolve how I think about this. And now I'm in this place where, I mean, legitimately, the people in our circle are like extended family to me. It's like
Hmm.
it would be hard for me to go a week without at least checking Twitter and seeing how you all are doing, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so and yet, this is my job. And when it comes to, say, readers who are becoming friends, and there are many of them who have, and not necessarily fellow writers, but just people who read my work,
Hmm.
um, there's this part of me that thinks, oh, should I be creating these relationships with these people when this is my work? And yet, it's sometimes it just happens. And I have some really wonderful friendships that I've built here that I would not want to give up just because of these boundaries that I'm not sure. I mean, meaning professional boundaries. Like how do I define? Like, should I say no friendship? I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah, I think that's something kind of strange that we still haven't maybe quite figured out
Yeah, definitely.
when your job involves being very personal
Right.
and talking about yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
definitely.
interesting. The most recent art form you've been exploring is film, which I love because I love when I don't know, I have this thing when I read someone's words and I don't know maybe what they look like or what they sound like.
Hmm.
I love when they go on to then maybe have a YouTube
Yeah,
channel
me
and I get
too.
to learn more about them.
Hmm.
Um, and you've done that. You've got some filmography stuff going on with YouTube, and I just thought maybe you could tell us a bit about that. I think you have more than one channel
Yes.
too.
Yeah. I started out with just the Yael Wolf channel to, have a space to give updates and stuff. And people had asked me like, "Oh, it would be really fun if you did some videos so that we could see you and hear your voice." And again, it's that, thing where, you share a lot of yourself and then people are like, "Oh, I really want to see you like we're talking," which
Yeah.
I get. And
Yeah.
I was okay with that. I hate videoing myself. It's just like all of this body dysmorphic disorder stuff coming to a head. It's like, oh God, I don't want to look
Oh,
at myself, but I'd rather photograph myself than video myself. But
gotcha.
I figure it's like a good exercise for me to just do it and be okay with it. And so I started that, and after this past month, when my sister moved away, I had a feeling that it was going to clear out some space for me to have a major creative rush, which tends to happen to me. Like if there's a loss in my life, that void will be filled with a new creative idea, like, oh, let's try this project. And
Yeah.
so sure enough, the project that came to me was, wouldn't it be cool if in this world right now that seems so chaotic and noisy and scary, 2020 especially, to take all of this footage, because I've been filming stuff for ages just for my own jollies, Like, wouldn't it be cool if I took all of these clips and all of this footage and put it together and created little like mini sanctuaries that people could dip into? So again, this idea of telling a story, but making it so tangible, like in a visual and even textural way, with lighting and like close-ups of nature and stuff like that, so that they could literally feel like they're stepping into something. And I thought, of course, you might know this, I write a little bit about ASMR and my addiction to ASMR videos.
I don't know if I've seen any of your writing about that, which is funny
Okay.
because I think people have strong opinions about ASMR.
Yes,
I'm
that's
one
why I
of
wrote
them.
about it.
I don't understand it, but I know some people do. And it's
Yeah. It's like patchouli. You either love it or you hate it.
I am curious about it. So I think I'm gonna go check out what you've done. You have something on YouTube with it, right?
Well, so this was my iteration of ASMR, because
Okay.
I don't know that I would be very good at like having a close up of my face while I'm tapping on stuff. Don't get me wrong, like that's super cool. And I literally watch videos like that when I'm falling asleep.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah. But I don't want to actually do that, for a multitude of reasons. It just doesn't seem that fun to me to make them. I just like watching them. But I thought, what if I could do it my own way? And so I, create these really slow, soft-spoken videos, and again, places that people could step into and just calm down and relax and feel like they're safe for a minute. And so I almost started publishing that on my my first channel. And then I thought, well, no, I want to keep those separate because there's going to be updates. And I mean, honestly, I'm kind of lazy with my update videos. I don't use my fancy camera for those. I don't worry about the lighting. I just want to be able to, here's a, communication from me, and that's it. I want the barrier to be low for me, because otherwise I won't do it.
Okay, so you're referring to when like the video where we took a walk with you.
That one is on the second channel that I created, because I wanted that one to be totally separate from these like update videos and me just talking,
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I was just so impressed with not only what you did with the camera. I mean, it just seems like you've been filming things for forever.
I have.
Yeah, I mean, like it seems like you have professional experience. Like it's up there. It is quality.
Oh God, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I also thought your voice and the writing, I was perfect. Like it was very calming, and I very much appreciated that in my day.
Oh, that means a lot to me. Thank you so much. It's been something that I have been studying, like I said, since I was 14, how to tell a story with a camera, and things that I've been experimenting with and playing with just for my own hobby. And then I thought, well, why shouldn't I just put this out there and just try?
So what are your YouTube channels called?
Oh yeah, I forgot to say that.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, the original one, that's just updates, and it's going to be about projects that I'm working on and things.
Okay.
That one is just my name, Yael Wolf. And the second one, that's going to be these, slow, soft-spoken stories and nature films and stuff. That's called The Silver Lantern.
Okay. Yes, I loved that, the name. What are some of your future goals for your work and for your career? And you're doing this creative stuff, like this is your full-time gig, isn't it?
Well, just so people know, because, I know that's like the what's the word? The holy grail is like, oh, if we could just do this all the time. I do want to be very clear about this so that other freelancers know. I have a ton of private clients that I write for, that are like marketing blogs and things like that, kind of boring stuff. So I do want to be clear that yes, I am like, this is my dream to be freelancing, but my dream is to be doing all my own work all the time. So right now it's like 50-50. So again, I just want to say that so that if anybody is out there thinking, when is this going to happen? This is so hard. I wish I was like that. It's, I'm having trouble with it too. It's, it's not easy
Yeah.
for me either. And so, yeah, I do a lot of work for private clients still, and that's a huge part of my income right now because I need it. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's just the reality of the situation.
for
But yes,
sure.
I'm freelancing full time, and I have very ambitious goals for my career. Like if you're talking about my selfish goals, I'll give you both of them, my selfish and
Sure.
unselfish goals.
Both of them. That's great. Yeah.
My selfish goals are I want to win a Newbery Medal like E.L. Konigsberg, a Pulitzer like Annie Proulx, and a Nobel like Toni Morrison. I want to be like the master of my craft, ever since I was a little girl, that was my thing, was like, I'm going to write every single day because I want to be good. That was actually when I first read Konigsberg. And I don't know if you know her. She's the lady who wrote, what's that book called? It's the one she won the medal for. And of course, I can't remember it, but it's not my
Well, I'm
favorite.
already going to say, I do not know.
The two kids who run away and they go and live in the Modern Museum of Art or something in New York City. Do you remember that book? From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweller. That's what it's called.
Oh, okay. No, I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's the most amazing book. It's not my favorite book of hers. My favorite book of hers is about a witch, but that's the one that won her the Newbery Medal, and it's so
Okay.
good.
Okay.
And I had read that book, and I remember, again, I thought, I'm going to be a writer, and I want to win a Newbery just like her.
And I guess what age group would this be for, and when did you read
It's
it?
it's like middle grade, like
Okay.
10 to
Yeah.
12-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, but still, you should read it. It's very good.
Sure. No, I can still get down with a good middle grade
Oh, yeah.
book. No
Same here.
problem.
So, yeah, I wanted to be like the best of the best. I wanted to, people say my name and they're like, oh, she's a quality writer,
Yeah.
I don't
No,
know why
I
that
feel
meant
like
so much to me then, but it did, and it still does.
yeah, I feel like that's kind of happening at this point, in the circles that I've run in and what I'm seeing online. I think you're well on your way, and I think other people think the same thing.
Oh, thank you. God, that's so
Yeah, for
sweet.
sure.
Thank you. So yeah, that's my selfish stuff, but the unselfish dreams, and honestly, if those selfish dreams don't happen, that's fine with me. I want the unselfish dreams to happen. Um, One of them is that I want to create more beauty in this world. That's it. Like, I just want to make this world more beautiful than when I came here, like the Boy Scouts,
Yeah.
like leave it prettier than it was when you, before you came.
Yeah.
And then the other one is that I want to inspire and fortify other people, really. Like, if someone reads something that I wrote or sees something like a photograph or a film, and they feel more at peace or inspired to create something of their own or anything like that, anything that makes them feel good and happy and able to put more good energy into the world, that is everything to me.
Speaking as a fellow writer, I feel kind of the same way, and I think you're doing that very well too.
Oh, thank you. I
Yeah,
feel
of
the same way
course.
about you. It's very interesting to me to have gotten into this circle and read people's experiences and to know how much they have changed me. Like, if I can literally write this list of people, and your name would be on that as well. And like the way that you've talked about your relationships and your perspectives and how you have come to your own sense of liberation, all of those things have affected me. And it's so amazing to think of that and to think like, oh, well, I feel this way now because of something that Holly wrote. And I just love how powerful it is and how we all affect each other in such an empowering way.
For sure. And one of the things that gets me hooked to people's writing is just when they go deeper, I guess. And it's not
Mhm.
just like surface, quick pieces to kind of, get more stuff out there. It's like really going deeper than that into the like emotions and mental aspects of things. And that's what gets me hooked.
Me too. Exactly. Like I want to dive deep for sure. It's funny. I actually thought of something while we were talking, and then of course it's just gone right
Sure.
out of my head.
Oh, okay.
I lost
Well,
it.
yeah.
It was like a little.
It happens like several times a day to me. Yeah.
Oh my God, same here. Yeah.
Actually, I got a little bit of wine before this,
Mhm.
just a little bit. So I'm proud of myself. It's not like it helps with nerves though.
You have to do that for sure, and especially like after you're
Self-care.
yes, and you're transitioning from your job to doing this. It's like no, just have a little nip.
Why don't you just tell us where people should go online to find you?
Okay. Yes.
To find your that sounded creepy. To find your work. And where would you direct people? Yes.
I have a website, yaelwolf.com. And then I'm on Instagram as Yael Wolf and Twitter as Yael Wolf Howells. And of course, I mentioned the YouTube. My name is one channel and the Silver Lantern is the other. And that's where I am now. I have an account on Facebook, but I never use it. So people always try to friend me there and say, why aren't you friending me back? And I'm not there.
Yeah, because I mean, Twitter is very supportive of the kind of writing we like to do. So.
Yes, I really appreciate
and Instagram.
That.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me. I loved it. It was so fun talking to you. We got to do it again.
Definitely. This was so fun. Thank you.
Yeah. And, I was a little scared at first, but it just like it felt not at all scary once we got into it. It was great.
Yeah, definitely. I
feel like
was thinking beforehand because the few times I've done this in the past, I would get really, really nervous. And I was definitely nervous because I always am for stuff like this. But there was just something like, okay, this is Holly. I feel very comfortable with that. It's going to be great. So calm down.
Oh, good. Yay. I'm glad that calmed you at least a little bit.
So. Oh, yeah, definitely. It helped a lot. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you. Woohoo! You made it to the end. You are probably part of a very exclusive, limited number of people. So thank you so much for listening to this point. If you got to this point, I would just love to tell you a little bit about how you can support the show, how you can support my work, so I can keep writing, keep improving, keep putting better stuff out there for you that you want. Check out the show notes and you will see you can support my work by visiting medium.com/@HollyBradshaw, and you will find my blog. Subscribe to Medium, and writers get paid based on reading time. So if you wanted to subscribe and you like what you read, go for it. You can also visit my Ko-Fi website in the show notes and see how you can support me there. Thank you again so much. Bye-bye.